Well, good morning and thank you all for being here. So yeah, this is part two. This is actually gonna be 1,000 years, so it's gonna be pretty rapid. I entitled this A Tale of Two Cities, meaning Rome and Constantinople, which is the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, actually the Roman Empire at this point. And Rome, which was previously the capital of the Western Roman Empire, but in 476 is no longer one. My subtitle here is Power Tends to Corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I'm sure you've heard of this.
Yeah.
And you'll see that it seems to be very much true throughout this narrative. So, let's have a quick prayer. Which is, dear Lord, we acknowledge that so much has changed in 2,000 years since you have been here. Two things remain the same: our steadfast faith in you and your eternal love for us. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. So I'm not looking now. Let's do this. Is it not moving?
No, but you can do it. Oh, my way.
That's how we did it last week, right?
No, that's not it.
There we go. Thank you, Jeremy.
Okay, so the first week was on the called basically the early church. So from the crucifixion of Christ 30 to 476, which was the acknowledged fall of the Roman Empire. And second part, Tale of Two Cities. Next week will be about the Reformation, the expansion of Christianity throughout Europe and the world. So summary of part one. This is easy. I'm gonna go through it very quickly. 30, Jesus crucified. 30, apostles witness resurrected Christ. So this is like, we can stop right here, basically. This is the whole story right here. It's a transformation. So we went through the fact that the disciples at the time of the crucifixion were, I don't know anything about this guy, leave me alone, to having something happen to them, having witnessing the resurrection. And that just transformed everything. Paul has his own transformation in Christ, and after 3 years of persecuting Christians, Paul sees the light, or doesn't see the light. Something happens to Paul. He is transformed in his own words. Paul leads conversions of the pagans. So to Christianity, which started out as a Jewish sect, in Paul's vision, who's Christ for? It's for everybody. So he goes out to convert the pagans, which are 93% of the Roman Empire. So it's a big game changer. And so we saw the exponential growth of Christianity. The pagans are converted, happily converted. We don't know exactly why, but they're happily converted. Rome tries but fails to crush Christianity. Rome always seems to be behind the wave a little bit. They're not, persecuting, but it's not doing anything. And finally, Constantine, for a couple of reasons. One, he is kind of a Christian. His mother's Christian. He feels Christianity, but also he sees Christianity as a way to unite the empire. Very important for him. He's a consummate politician. Constantine convenes the Council of Nicaea. It's determined then that Jesus is God, very important event in 325. And then in 380, Christianity becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire. And then that's the time when we celebrate, right? Just game's over, it's all we won. But not to be, because there's a 381 Council of Constantinople confirms the Trinity as official. So a lot of these big things are happening quite early. And moving on. So over the 400 years, we review the early church asks, who can be a Christian? What are the promises of Christianity? Who will be saved? Who should lead us? What do we believe in? How should we act? And who is Jesus Christ? All addressed and answered in forms in the early years. So this is, I'm not spending time on this, but just think about the conversions that took place, the apostles, Paul, the pagans, Constantine. What do you think about that? And the Roman state becomes thoroughly invested in Christianity. I think this is one of the most interesting things. Is so the state takes a real interest in what happens on the religious side. What happens when the Christians are in power? Are they magnanimous? to the Jews and to the pagans? No, they are not. Once they're in power, they start persecuting the pagans and Jews, and that's sad, but they're sort of, story of humanity. Anyway, there's gonna be a change in 476. Guess who's coming for dinner? So this is, if I were a barbarian, I'd be offended by this, but this is actually a painting of the sack of Rome that took place in 410. But the barbarians, no shirts on and so forth. Maybe that's not exactly how it was, but it did happen. There was death, there was destruction. And here are the people who are coming. The Vandals are coming, the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths. And the most feared of all the barbarians, the Goths.
Governments.
And they're still with us today. Barbarians of the gate, the fall of Rome. So in 395, the Roman Empire was formally split between the West and the East. We talked about that. So very different cultures, right? There's the Greek culture and Constantinople's the capital, and there's the Western culture. The East is far more wealthy, far more powerful than the West. The Western half had been in fact declining politically for years. It's already been sacked. And then the last Roman emperor was deposed in 476. Oh yeah, I say barbarians. So I don't mean to offend anybody who has a link to barbarians. In fact, I think we all do, because what barbarian means is that you can't speak Greek or Latin, which means, hey, I can't, I'm a barbarian, I guess. And apparently I read somewhere that the name came about because the Greeks, when they heard somebody who couldn't speak Greek speak, it sounded they're speaking like ba ba, like a sheep. So they call it barbarians.
Interesting.
Much remains the same. So Rome collapses. The political side of Rome collapses. What remains? Actually, nothing really changes a whole lot, at least not initially. The Senate still meets. Rome will also govern the lands, because the barbarians actually don't want to destroy Roman culture. They're moved into the Western Roman Empire because they've been pushed out of their own lands. So they're seeking to settle in the Roman Empire. They actually admire Roman institutions, but there's political rivalry among the tribes, so they are fighting each other. So there's going to be a lot of war. What does this mean for Christianity? All this upheaval. Christianity continues to thrive. It turns out that many of the barbarians are actually Christian, albeit they're Arians, which remember the discussion about Arians and anti-Arians. Arians don't accept Christ as God. They believe that God created Christ. Apparently they didn't get the memo because that already been decided a long time ago. But even the pagans are not really persecuting Christians. And even as Rome was weakening, the Bible was translated into Latin, so it's more available to the populace. Of course, you have to read Latin. St. Patrick converts Ireland by 432. And Leo, this is amazing. I think there was a movie made of this. Leo stopping Attila as he's coming to Rome. Do you see that movie a long time ago? Anyway, people were thinking, wow, this guy Leo, that's pretty good. And important ecumenical councils shaped Christian orthodoxy early on. So we already talked about this before, the Council of Nicaea. Jesus Christ is God, not created by God. Council of Constantinople confirms that the Trinity in 381, so before the collapse, and the Council of Chalcedon, convened by the Roman Emperor, confirms there's two natures of Christ, fully human and fully divine. So all these things we accept today, and they were established very early on. By the way, I thought we'd take a trip to St. Augustine, because there is this fellow named Augustine of Hippo. Do you know Augustine? Did you study him in college, perhaps? Hippo's in North Africa, by the way. Anyway, St. Augustine, so he's quite famous. He's credited more than any other cleric in formulating Christian theology. I know very little about him, but he did say that not everything is predetermined. We have our own free will, and will that can can lead us to decisions that produce evil. But grace is something that cannot be willed. That is a gift, something we believe today. He also had a whole treatise on a just war. And maybe C.J. Dixon talked about that. I missed that session, but Augustine thinks that if war is conducted on a humanitarian type basis, so, there's a good reason for it, basically, then it's okay. And this is actually a very handy thing to happen, because there's gonna be a lot of wars, a lot of wars. So what do the barbarians do? So I'll just do this very quickly. The Vandals wander around, they settle in North Africa, the Visigoths wander around, end up in Spain. Burgundians or France, they become outright Catholics, meaning they switch from Arianism to Trinitarians. The Franks are in France and Germany. They're a pagan, tribal, and unruly. This is an important tribe. It's a big tribe. They're pagans until the king asks Christ to give a victory in a battle, and he wins. So that's proof that Christ is on his side and becomes a Christian. That sounds familiar. It's kind of like Constantine in his conversion. Okay. And then there's Ostrogoths in Italy, the Angles and Saxon in Britain, Anglo-Saxon. They convert to Christianity by 600. In Scotland, Columba comes from Ireland and spreads Christianity. We're going to talk about that. So can we talk about it at some point? Or did we talk about that? I don't know.
In our Scotland travels,
Scotland
yes.
travels. Okay, so I'm kind of a map nerd, and this is a really, can you see this map at all?
Yeah.
But what's cool about it is, well, I'll do it by colors. So the yellow color, the gold color, Eastern Roman Empire. So the Eastern Roman Empire stays intact. It's very wealthy, very powerful. They've been pushed out a little bit from the Balkans, but they're a big deal. And then you have the scattering of these tribes. You can see the Vandals in the orange in North Africa, the Visigoths in Spain, the kingdom of the Franks in France and Germany, and other Anglo-Saxons moving into Britain. So that's where the state of the world. So a little bit, it's chaotic in 526. But then the empire strikes back. And this means the Eastern Roman Empire. Although the Russian Roman Empire collapsed, the Eastern Roman Empire, also called the Byzantine Empire, that was the yellow bit, that remains intact, very powerful. And Justinian, Justinian the Great, seeks to oust the barbarians from the west and restore the full empire under his name, centered in Constantinople. Okay, he wants to do that. That's fine. Sounds like a very Roman thing to want to do. Justinian kicks the Vandals out of North Africa, reconquers Italy for a while, and oversees the rewriting of the Roman law, which becomes the basis for civil law. I don't know much about Constantinople. I've never been to Istanbul, but it was glorious, and this is a depiction of it around 527. So this is what Justinian accomplishes. The Byzantine or Eastern Roman Empire expands. It's a lot like the old Roman Empire when it was just one. So they're controlling the Mediterranean. And the barbarians are in their different kingdoms around the Eastern Roman Empire. But it doesn't last long in that configuration. Meanwhile, besides the political events, what's happening with the church? There's the start and growth of monasticism. Remember when we talked about when the church became approved by the state and became powerful, they got tax breaks, and the church suddenly become very, very wealthy. A lot of Christians thought, this is not exactly the church I signed up for, and they leave, and they go in the desert and live as hermits, seeking a pure form of Christianity. And one is Benedict. Benedetto de Nursia, becomes a hermit and lives in a cave, but he's so scholarly, he develops a group of disciples. And Benedict develops the rule, and that becomes the model for monastic life: work, discipline, study, obedience, service to the underprivileged, and prayer 8 times a day. And he founds the monastery of Monte Cassino, which was destroyed by the Lombards because the Eastern Roman Empire had been there, they got pushed out. But the rule becomes a model for monastic orders throughout the Western Church. What do the Benedictine monks do and not do? They developed schools, hospitals, pharmacies, hospitals for travelers. It was fantastic what they were doing for the people. And they had a profound economic impact in putting land into productive agricultural use. I think of what they did in our service in forms of wine and beer and brandy. They did not, however, this is true, did not produce this miracle. This actually was created by a French entrepreneur in the 1800s who said he found the secret recipe from the Benedictines and was using it and used it and stamped it with Deo Optima Maximo, to God, most good, most great. But in a total, a sucker's born every minute kind of thing, so. So after Monte Cassino was rebuilt, this is what it looked like before 1944. You might know the story, but it was bombed in World War II and looked like that afterwards. Just a reminder that man's inhumanity to man and wars, goes on and still exists today. The other major development besides the monastic movement is the Pope, the papacy. Pope means father. It was used for all the bishops were popes around Christianity. Rome had never been a center of Christianity. That was in the East and in North Africa. But after the confusion of the barbarian invasions, the church became the center of order and justice. And the Bishop of Rome, i.e. the Pope, became the de facto leader. And it was Leo who stared down Attila. Leo was succeeded by Hilarius in 461. That's no joke. The Pope becomes more and more powerful, saving Rome from the other barbarians, Lombards. But there's a strong wind blowing in from the east. Real power still resides with the emperor in Constantinople, and friction between the west and east branches of Christianity intensifies. Who's in charge? Who gets to set the agenda? The Pope in Rome decides to seek military assistance from the Franks, not Constantinople, so he shifts his allegiances. This will have major ramifications. Meanwhile, in the backwater of forgotten, ignored Arabia, there is born a man who will change the world forever. There's but one God, and Muhammad is his prophet. Muhammad ibn Abdullah, an intellectually curious Arab merchant from Mecca, receives revelation from God via the angel Gabriel, and Gabriel gets around. Muhammad's revelations from God are recorded and compiled as the Quran. Muhammad thought he was not founding a new religion. He just had the special insight from God. It was a culmination of what God had revealed in the Hebrew prophecies and Jesus. Jesus was a prophet, not God in Muhammad's view, but a very important prophet. So Muhammad is talking, but nobody listening to him. He reveals his revelations in Arabia to the Jewish population, the pagans, and the Christian communities. And not everybody's convinced. They are not buying into his story that he's receiving the message directly from God, and this is where it should be. So there's bloodshed. In fact, a lot of bloodshed. But by 632, the Arabian Peninsula is Islamic. And its successor, this is sort of a description of how Islam advances. So it's very different from Christianity. Islam is a power that was established by the sword and not faith confirmed by divine miracles like Christianity and other old law of Moses. So remember, Christianity was advancing. This sounds, I know, heavily biased, but Christianity advances through converting the pagans and stuff peacefully. Islam is not. But Islam has, oh, by the way, I just wanted to show you one thing is, this is a book I did not read, I like to read, called Destiny Disrupted, the history of the world through Islamic eyes. So what I'm giving you is my own biased, Protestant, Presbyterian view of the world. But if I had read this book and were showing this presentation with a different perspective, we'd have a different different slides, I think. The Caliphate succeed Muhammad and they quickly expand Islam. Caliphate means successor to Muhammad. So Muhammad speaks for God. The Caliphates are successors to Muhammad, so they're speaking for God. And the state and the religion are one and the same. So it's different in Christianity, where you have the emperor, the temporal power, and the pope, the spiritual power. In Islam, they're one and the same. So this is what amazing what happens. So think of all these major cities in Christianity that fall by the wayside very quickly in the 600s. Damascus, Jerusalem, Alexandria, Carthage, and so forth. And Spain is taken over by the Muslims since 700s. And France is invaded, but that's as far as they get in this round anyway, and they're defeated in France at Tours. That's that correctly, Leslie? Tours? So here's the stretch of the early success of Islam. It's amazing. It's amazing, starting out in Arabia, extending all through collapse of the Persian Empire, up through the Middle East, Syria, Egypt, all the way into Spain, and then defeated in France. In 100 years, this took place. Why? Why did Islam expand so rapidly? I don't know. Eastern Empire and the Persian Empire have been fighting each other for years. They were weakened. That's one theory. Another theory that the Byzantine and Persian rules were viewed as oppressive. So I'd say, oh, really? Because I think everybody was oppressive back then. The Muslims offer religious tolerance, though. They don't go and kill everybody. They kill their enemies, they don't kill everybody. Like the Romans, if you pay your taxes, you can, and don't revolt, then you can stay with your religion, whether you're Christian or Jew, that's fine. That sounds just like the ancient Romans. And maybe they converted to Christianity back in those days were less until they committed to Christianity, because they certainly became Islamic very quickly. Ramifications of both these. So what happens here? Now all the ancient sites of Christianity by 700 are under Muslim rule. Christianity disappears or ceases to grow in those areas. Alienation between Rome and Constantinople, East and West, well, Christians, but fighting Christians. Rome's focus is now on Western Europe, making alliances in Western Europe. And Christianity becomes more and more comfortable with militancy. You know, in fact, at one point, this is later on, but the Pope will have his own state. The Pope will have his own army. The Pope goes to war. Oh, sorry. So very different from the strict pacifism of the early church that we covered last time. Okay, so now I know this is getting a lot of detail, but there was the creation of the new Roman Empire in the West. That's later called the Holy Roman Empire. And you might, so the joke always was that it was not holy, it wasn't Roman, and really wasn't an empire. It was created in 800 through Charlemagne. While the Eastern Roman Empire is shrinking, Charlemagne does a great job in conquering his neighbors, and he develops a little bit of empire for himself. At 800 in St. Peter's Basilica, Charlemagne is crowned by the Pope as emperor of the new Roman Empire. So this showing this symbiotic relationship between the temporal power, Charlemagne, and the spiritual power, the Pope. Actually, Charlemagne was in Rome because Pope Leo was being investigated for wrongdoings. And Leo thought maybe a good move here would be to put the crown on Charlemagne's head, make him a holy emperor, and therefore maybe Charlemagne wouldn't persecute him. It worked. Okay, the Western Church and the dominant political power are simpatico. Meanwhile, folks in Constantinople are like, what's the deal here? What do you mean you have your own empire over here that's linked with the Bishop of Rome? What's that all about? Charlemagne's view of that is, I don't care what the Eastern Church is, they're a filthy pond of hell anyway. So there was, some tension. This is a depiction of the crowning of Charlemagne, Christmas Day, 800. I'm sure it didn't happen this way at all. It reminded me of the crowning of Napoleon 1,000 years later. Napoleon actually takes the crown and actually puts it on his own head, but it's still the same idea, the empire and the Pope. The Holy Roman Empire is big. France, Germany, Switzerland, parts of Italy, and so forth. What we call Western Europe for the most part. So, a little bit of break here. So, just a review here. So the Byzantine Empire has lost major territory to the caliphates. The Eastern Roman Empire believes that its brand of Christianity is the correct brand. In Western Europe, there's a newly formed feudal confederation of states called the Holy Roman Empire. The emperor and the Pope have a symbiotic relationship. They believe their brand of Christianity is the correct brand. So look at Europe this way. So there's three major players. The Holy Roman Empire, that is Rome, Christian, Latin as language. The Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, Christian, Greek, Constantinople, the capital, and the Caliphates, Muslim, Arabic, and Baghdad, which is the largest city in the world at that time. And then also the Vikings, these aggressive pagans, no fixed address, they go by boat, and they cause a lot of turmoil, and they get a lot of press. So there's the big three here depicted here. The big pink bit is the Western Roman Empire.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
doing they do a Sunday school class over Zoom. It's about the history of basically civilization through.
Yeah, that's
The
correct.
advertisement.
The green bit is the Caliphates. You don't see their extent, it's far out off the page. And then the Eastern Roman Empire is now, that's another shade of pink around. You can see what that is? Is that clear?
The bright pink, the light pink.
Turkey and.
Yeah, so, and that's Constantinople right there. So that's Greece, the Aegean Sea, Turkey, Bulgaria would be there, what used to be Yugoslavia, so forth, so. I love my maps. So this is so feudal, the Roman Empire, 800 to 1000. After Charlemagne's death, the empire was divided in 843 into what is now France and Germany, and it gets complicated, more complicated. The Muslim conquest disrupted trade patterns that created so much wealth. There's, they're in charge of the Mediterranean to a large part. Consequently, the main source of wealth in the West was land, not money. And the granting of land rights led to a system of feudalism, I give you this land, but you pay homage to me, you can divide your land up to others and so forth. The church has vast landholding, the church is becoming richer and richer. And wealthy church, well, I said power corrupts. There's a little simony going on, selling church jobs, there's a little bribery, it can happen, we're only human. What about the person, what about the average, what about the peasant? What's going on with them? The church dominates their entire lives, birth, coming of age, marriage, and death. The church sets the calendar, when are feast days, saint days, when you have to go to church. But the church was also the center for business. Since priests could read and write, contracts, business was being done there, taxes were paid in the church, important news delivered, it was the center of the community. Church was a community, the monks provided prayers and help. And then the most important thing was the Sunday worship at Mass. Huge spectacle, incense, candles, very impressive. I've never seen anything so Byzantine, Eastern Roman Empire. The Muslim forces try to conquer Constantinople, they're defeated. Empires engaged in military conflicts, Church begins to expand again, some recovery, they get Syria back, and they improve some trade relations. So the Eastern Roman Empire is actually in pretty good shape. And why do you think they call it algebra? The golden age of Islam, because the Arabs invented algebra, it turns out. Conflict continued with Byzantium and Rome. But commerce and trade expand rapidly in their empire and also with the West. It brings prosperity to Arabs. This is known as this is brought out in this book, I think here, the prosperity to the Arabs. And they develop concepts that are used now, concepts of trust, pension, and welfare. Baghdad was the largest city in the world, prosperous. Literacy rate was among the highest in the world in the Golden Age. Significant advances in the sciences, math, physics, etc. And contributions to art and architecture was outstanding. There's an example, I don't know where this is, but have any of you been to the Alhambra in Granada in Spain? Yes. Yeah, beautiful example of the Golden Age. My kind of town, the Vikings. The Vikings are, their success is due to their seamanship. The pagans, they're pagans, of course, and they were raided and plundered, going up the Seine to Paris, Russia, even Canada. But they knew the value of buck, and they became very, very skillful as merchants and slave traders. They eventually settled in areas they raided and became assimilated into the local population, such as famously France, Normandy, and part of that story. Okay. Congratulations, it's 1,000 years, we've made it to 1,000 years. And I don't have sound effect, but I do have, just to celebrate the moment, because it was a big moment. I do have borrowed from my grandson. And a 1,000 years we did it. But here's the question. What happened to the apocalypse? Thousands of people gathered around waiting for the apocalypse. It's supposed to happen. They waited all night. Nothing happened.
And then, yeah.
I think it happened in 2002, didn't it? Okay, the Great Schism. We were coming, we knew that, you knew this was gonna happen, right? Tension between the Catholic Church in Rome and the Orthodox Church in Constantinople, just been going on for centuries. Disagreement among icons be used, the Nicene Creed, clergy marry, unleavened or leavened bread, anything that could be discussed was debated and they disagreed on seemingly. I'm overstating that. Particularly going east was the claim that the Pope is a direct successor to the Apostle Peter. Has the final say on all theological matters. Who does this guy think he is? So they had a flurry of mutual excommunications and basically had a divorce. That's it. I've had it with you, done. But something happens in 1099. Constantinople is threatened by the Muslim Turks yet again, and the Byzantine emperor asked the West for support. Yeah, sometimes divorce partners still need each other. But Christian West sees this as a great opportunity to free the Holy Land and put Pope Urban in a position of leadership in a holy cause. Also, he get all the different kings and princes and dukes from fighting each other. Give them another mission, go to Jerusalem. What could go wrong? The first thing is like thousands of peasants are inspired by this and go off without anything, just by themselves to the Holy Land. Of course, it's a disaster. They're killed and sold into slavery. So the real first crusade is pan-European, so that's interesting. So different nationalities were coming together, led by Bishop. They had success. They entered Jerusalem in 1099. What do? They kill everybody in Jerusalem, everybody, and occupy it in the Holy Land for about a century. Gee, everybody. There they are, happy throng. Gates of Hell, they're against the church. Also, I think a lyric from this hymn. The Second Crusade fails. Second Crusade was going to relieve the folks in Jerusalem, the Crusaders that are taking over Jerusalem. Saladin takes Jerusalem in 1187. He grants mercy to everybody. I think you could buy your freedom for 10 pence, something like that. No one is killed by the Muslims. So in contrast to the Christians. The Third Crusade tries to take Jerusalem and fails. Richard Lionheart is taken prisoner. And he goes to put in prison at Durstein, which, as you can see, is still there. If you take a trip up the Danube, past Melk, I know Chuck's been to Melk, and you pass Durstein, where this little footnote. Fourth Crusade doesn't even make it to the Holy Land. They end up in Constantinople and say, okay, we'll take this. So it's like a Christians declaring war on Christians, basically. They occupy it for 50 years, kill people, and they call it the Latin Empire. There's no, I guess Constantinople says, after this, we are definitely not getting back together. I don't care what you say. The Fifth Crusade failed, sixth, the seventh, eighth, major disasters. So that's the Crusades, kind of a disaster, all in the name of Christ. Pretty awful. But there are good times. Crusades brought to a close. And then the mendicant monastic orders, like the Franciscans, the Dominicans, emerge and become highly influential, teach at universities, particularly the Dominicans. What does this say? Oh, yes. Okay, so it's basically more cooperation between the temporal power, the Holy Roman Empire, and Rome. Two big powers. So why does, if you're the temporal power, why do you want the spiritual power? It's like Constantine. If I can have something that the people flock to and people obey, then I can have unification. That's a good thing for me. I don't want to have lots of squabbles. I got enough squabbles to deal with. I don't want everybody to squabble. The power of the papacy increased. One flock under one shepherd. Pope was now more than human. And this is a quote from Pope Boniface VIII. So I'm gonna read this because it's unbelievable, I think. One sword must be under the other. The temporal authority, the empire, must be subject to the spiritual, me. Therefore, if earthly powers stray from the right path, it is to be judged by the spiritual, me. But if the supreme authority strays, me, it can only be judged by God and not by humans. I'm above humanity. We further declare, further define, it's absolutely necessary for salvation that all human creatures be under the Roman pontiff, me. That's the Pope. And I say that, of course, you know, Presbyterian, so. And, okay, let's go, we need a break. St. Thomas, please. Yeah, St. Thomas Aquinas, this is a high point of scholasticism. A lot of the monks founded houses at Oxford, Cambridge, Paris, and so forth around Europe. Thomas Aquinas is one of the most influential. I'm gonna like not do him justice at all. Some truths are within the reason and others are beyond it. All truth necessary for salvation has been revealed. The existence of God is an article of faith. And I think that is pretty huge. I think it reminds me of we walk not by sight, but by faith. Here's kind of bundled that a little bit, but from Paul. And there's some, also the architecture, so it's when the Catholic cathedrals being built. And there are bad times. There are bad times. Nationalism starts to erode papal authority. Maybe that's a good thing. But France and the papacy have a major falling out. You've heard of the Babylonian captivity or the Avignon captivity. So France basically elects its own pope. So you have two popes, one in France and one in Rome. Right. And of course, with the 100 Years' War, right, about that, 100 Years' War. And a total downer is the Great Plague, which causes the death of approximately a third of the Europe's population. That's like the US losing 100 million people with COVID. Yeah. Result, economic destruction, fear, superstition, witches, and so forth. Veneration of relics, and who's to blame? Jews always get blamed, and so there's massive anti-Semitism and deaths of Jews. And there's a rebound and a big loss. Let's start with the bad news. Bad news is finally, after all these years, Constantinople falls to the Muslims in 1453. It had stood for 1,000 years, but it collapsed. From now on, Constantinople will be Istanbul. And so, what do we know about the Eastern Roman Empire? It's really kind of like out of our sight a little bit. Of course, it exists. There's a Greek Orthodox Church, there's a Russian Orthodox Church, et cetera. But in terms of what it had been, it's kind of vanished because of the success of the Muslims. Okay, after the plague subsided, there's improved trade. People start making some money. There's renewed interest in the arts and science. Then there's Renaissance. Once you make money, then you got enough money, and you want to buy some art, sponsor some artists and so forth, and that develops. But the papacy is still getting richer. According to one of the authors, I read Gonzalez, Chuck Lincoln's book. Popes were carried away by the spirit of the age. Hey, you've seen them in love of pomp, despotic power, and sensual pleasure. Let's have some fun. But there's some dissents out there. Some people think maybe we've gone too far. John Wycliffe, who translated the Bible into English, regards the church collection of taxes for some benefit as illegitimate. The true Church of Christ is not the Pope. Only the church can interpret the Bible correctly. And he rejected transubstantiation. Of course, this does not go well. He died of a stroke, but his remains were dug up and they were burnt. As punishment, eternal punishment. And John Hus, a pope who does not obey the Bible is not to be obeyed, and only God can grant forgiveness. The Pope does not like this. And Hus is burned at the stake. Early dissenters. And this is just the beginning. Part two is the summary. So I don't think you probably heard enough. But, West and East are Christian. Eastern Empire eventually disappears. Western Roman Empire collapses but remains Christian. Vikings are assimilated. The Western Roman Catholic Church prospers. The Roman Catholic Church survives. But all the voices of dissent appear. There he is. next week. Does anybody have a nail? If you're gonna tack something on the church door, make sure you have enough nails. That's Martin Luther, of course. And that's where we're gonna start next week with the Reformation. Okay, we have a little time. I guess I blew through that more quickly than I thought.